Well, let's get started. I haven't seen too many people join in the last 30 seconds or so. So we'll get started. Again, welcome to today's presentation. Today is one of 4 presentations on the business intelligence concepts and Excel tools. Something to get, transform, and visualize your data to drive performance. My name is David Warsnick. I'm a senior consultant at CCSI in Rochester, New York. For becoming a consultant with CCSI, I worked as a Chief Financial Officer for Spectrum Health and Human Services outside of Buffalo for 34 years. And for about the last 7 years before I retired in mid-year this year, I concentrated my efforts on data analytics, business intelligence tools, financial modeling, and utilizing the resources that are available to us now to build a more robust data analytic infrastructure. I've found in my work for the last 5 years that the tools that we're going to be talking and the concepts that we'll be talking about over the next 4 sessions were real fundamental in my ability to provide data to the organization to drive decision making and performance. So that, as I said, this is going to be a 4-part series. Please take note that we had to reschedule 2 of the presentations. We were going to do a presentation next week. We needed to move that. I apologize. That was a conflict in my schedule that I could not resolve. If you've registered for session 2, 3, and 4, you do not need to register again. So please take note of the changes in the date. You have registered. You will be receiving an email sometime today that will remind you of the change in schedule. That's not a problem for anybody, and I apologize if that caused any inconvenience for folks. But today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some fundamentals. I like to have set up sort of contextual framework for us to be working on, and then we'll go sequentially through some of the tools. To probably have time to look a little bit at table and pivot tables, and then a second session we'll take a look at our ability to get and transform your data through what Excel used to call Power Query, which is now what they're calling Get and Transform. The third sessions will look at data models and data visualization. And then finally on November 13th, we'll have office hours. We'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions about the concepts or the tools that we'll be describing and taking a look at over the next 3 sessions. In terms of questions today, if you do have a question that arises, please use the chat box and chat that in. What we'll be doing is we'll be monitoring the questions as they come in. I anticipate that we'll have some time at the end of the session today to answer questions that you may have. The objectives. The learning objectives for this series is to gain a better understanding of concepts related to business intelligence. That people are throwing that phrase around a lot these days, BI tools. But I think we're going to start with really talking a little bit about what those concepts are and how they relate to the work that you're doing in your organization. Then we're going to become aware of the functionality in Excel that supports data analysis and data visualization. And that includes some of the things that you've probably been working with already, tables, pivot charts, which I have some time to show today. And we'll start working into the more advanced tool sets, the Power Query, which is the tool, the Power Pivot, which is a data modeling tool, and we'll touch on some of the what are the DAX formulas or the analytic expression formulas was to really add a significant layer of functionality to our data models. And we're building sequentially the demonstration of the tools by using a of a BI productivity monitoring tool. So today's presentation, which is going to be, a majority of it's going to be context and PowerPoints. We'll do a little bit of Excel work, but in our second and third sessions, we'll primarily be looking at and manipulating and looking at the tools inside of Excel. So, being said, let's get started. Part 1, Fundamentals of Business Intelligence. So let's start with one of the challenges. I'm certainly not telling you anything you don't already know about some of the challenges that we're facing. Last 3 years, particularly with the DISRIP projects coming up, the need for timely and accurate information to inform our decisions is increasing at a rapid pace as we think forward to value-based and performance-based contracting, continued involvement with our PPSs, maybe your involvement with a network or an IPA or an ACO, the need for us to have good information is just increasing exponentially. And data-informed decisions will be key to our success. Understanding what our benchmarks are, how we are progressing against our benchmarks, being able to make midterm or mid-process adjustments to improve the quality of our services, meet contractual obligations. Those decisions have to be data-driven. We have to be able to begin to leverage the data that exists in our environment and bring them forward, bring that data forward in a way that can be used to make decisions. We'll walk through that process over the next couple sessions. The challenge we face too is data is created in different applications. It's stored in different locations. You have different formats. We have a wealth of data at our fingertips. We have billing data, we have clinical data, we have financial data in our general ledger, we have payroll data in our payroll systems. We may have systems that we've developed to grab data. We have huge amounts of data, but many of us, they're locked away. They're locked away in our applications. They're locked away in different databases. Access may be limited. Data's out in different formats. So one of the real important aspects of the business intelligence tools is the ability to access this data in its raw form, transform it to make it usable, and then bring it in to Excel in this case, and build a data model. The data model allows us to take information from different sources and robustly model out the conditions that exist in the environment. So it's increasingly important to take data from different sources to complete a complete picture of your environment. The example I use all the time with this is one of the things that is really important for us these days is to make sure that we're efficiently using our clinical capacity, that those staff that are providing direct clinical care that drives the quality metrics, that drives our revenues, it's really important to understand how well we're using those resources. One measures of that people use sometimes is direct clinical contact hours versus paid hours. Well, in our billing systems, in our EHRs, in many systems, we have a timestamp. So we know how long each of our individual clinicians is spending in providing direct care services. What we don't know is how many hours we've paid them. That data sits inside of our payroll system. So the BI tools allow us to pull data from our payroll systems, marry it with data from our EHR systems and the timestamps on our clinical interventions, and gives us that metric that is important for us to understand how well our clinical resources are being utilized. That's just one example of the need to aggregate and join data from different data sources. And the thing is, data must be provided to end users in a way that's easy to use and easy to understand. None of us want to go and turn all of our supervisors, executive leadership, and even our clinical staff into data analysts. That is just not possible. So what we need to do is think about how we can bring data forward in a manner that's easy to understand and easy to use and meaningful for people. So the challenges. People say all the time, where do I start? Well, start always with sort of a strategy. After we've gone through these sessions, hopefully you'll have more information. You'll begin to understand where your gaps are and begin creating a strategy for moving forward. Leverage current resources. One of the reasons that I'm focusing on using BI tools in Excel is that I would guess everybody who is listening to this webinar has those business intelligence tools on their desktop. You don't have to pay any more money for it. You don't have to stand up additional applications. Excel, Microsoft and Excel, particularly in the most recent Excel versions, have done what I believe is a significant job in being these analytic tools inside of Excel. In fact, I see that Excel actually end up converting itself to be more of a data analytic tool than the kinds of tools that we've used that in the past. And then create a data-informed environment. That's a little bit harder to do, but you develop that environment where your decisions are driven by data, where every decision has a data point or a series of data points behind them that with accurate data and timely data that helps you inform your decision making. That's the only way we're going to get better. So that's where we start. A lot of people think that business intelligence, utilization of those tools require significant investments, and that's just not the case. And hopefully you'll see that a little bit as we go through our presentations over the next 3 sessions. So I always want to start with a definition, since we're going to be talking with each other hopefully for the next today and for 3 more sessions. Let's have a shared understanding of what business intelligence is. I like this definition. It's actually drawn from a couple of different sources, but it really gives a more complete overview of what I'm talking about when I talk about business intelligence. It's a term that refers to skills, processes, technologies, applications, and practices you support evidence-based decision-making in an organization, combined as approaches for gathering, storing, analyzing, and providing data that helps users to gain insights and make better fact-based decisions. So if we go back to the beginning of the definition, we need skills, and we're going to be taking a look at some skills that need to be applied to the tools, processes for gathering data, for getting data, for forming our data, for cleaning our data. We need tools to do that, technologies to do that, places to keep our data, ability to bring it down, and applications that are going to support the practice. So everybody has processes, technologies, applications. Where you start is needing to think about some of the skill sets that are necessary to support this environment and who in your organization, because some of those skills that can be enhanced to move forward. So we're going to talk a bit more in the next couple minutes about gathering, storing, analyzing, and providing data. So let's move on to those right now. So gathering data. This is a process and tool used to access, cleanse, and aggregate information used for reporting and analysis. So I mentioned earlier, we have data in all kinds of different data sources. We have to be able to get at that data. There's simple kind of examples. You could write a report, run a report from your EHR. That's gathering data. Download data from Psyches. That's gathering data. Or you could use a query tool to directly access a database, your EHR data. So there's different tools and different methodologies. But the first actually is understanding where your data is and connecting to it in whatever fashion is available to you to bring that data down so we can begin using it. And we'll be talking much more about the tools necessary to do this in later sessions. So once we gather our data, we have to store it, and we have to store it in a fashion that is available and useful to us. And since we're working with protected health information, we have to think through all of the security and the confidentiality and the need to know requirements around our data. Our data, once we've gathered it, needs to be maintained in a secure environment. It needs to be backed up. It needs to be accessible by our analysis and visualization tools. A lot of people don't think about storing data as part of business intelligence, but business intelligence is all about efficiency. So one of the efficiencies is gathering your data and then putting it in a secure central repository to make it accessible to us. The other piece about storing this, it needs to be updated on a regular basis. Some people build data models in data warehouses that they go out and grab their data continuously, or may want to update your data on a daily basis. So these different issues involved with getting your data and putting it into a secure environment. That second phase of business intelligence, as you gather your data, you need to store it. And then there's the analysis. I find that people generally can't define what analyzing data really means. So I went out there and tried to put a construct of what I talk about when I talk about analyzing data. And that's a process of interpreting the meaning of data by looking for patterns, disparities, trends, and other relationships that can support decision-making and lead to insights. I think that one of the things that I always look at is I look at trends. Trends tell me a tremendous amount about our data, and I'll be showing you how I use trend kind of analysis. Disparities, when I create analytic environments for financial analysis, what we do is we have a financial model, and then we evaluate where we are against that model. We look for disparities. We take those disparities and we do a variance analysis and look for cause to really understand what decisions need to be made and how we can move those forwards. And things that is in this definition is insights. Many times we don't know what we're looking for, but may begin looking at our data and find a pattern that we didn't know existed. That pattern then leads us to other questions. Data analysis and data insight sometimes is this iterative process of looking at patterns, looking at similarities, asking ourselves the question of, is that meaningful? What does that mean? How how does that help me understand our processes? How did it help us understand the quality? How does that help us understand what decisions we may make? So data analysis has this insight component that I think is really important. I call it data discovery. So I'm going to look for patterns, similarities, disparities, and trends. Give us insight and also give us data to drive our decision making. Some examples. A simple example is a bar graph. You have a bar graph that examine the percentage of clients that reported reduction in smoking after a smoking cessation intervention. So you have intervention. You begin tracking the percentage of clients that reported reduction. You track that over time. You build that into a simple bar graph. You add a linear regression or a trend line to that. You're evaluating how well this intervention works. You watch it over time. If you're not meeting your benchmark standards, then the question is, what can we do differently? What is the problem that we had not anticipated because we thought we were going to be successful? So that's part of the analytic process. And then providing data to end users. Process and tools used to provide end users in a dynamic, visual, and easy to understand manner. That little example there, it still looks like a sort of a table, and it's not a chart or a graph. If you take a look at it, it's laid out really fairly simply with basic data. It's got the monthly data. It gives you the 2 data points that you need to know. It tells whether you're being successful against your benchmark. In June, we had 100%, and that is our goal, 100%. In November, we were down to 47%. So we built tiny little flags in here to draw your attention to where you're doing well, where you're not doing well. So these are really, in some cases, very simple and straightforward changes that you can make to your data that is visually appealing, draws people's eyes, into the kind of dashboard kind of tools. When you're driving in your car and you glance down and you're doing the speed limit, that's fine, you're doing good. But if you glance down and you're doing 15 miles an hour over your speed limit, you're going to make some changes, and that's how our dashboards are designed. It doesn't have to be tremendously high tech, but it does have to be visual, draw people's eyes, tell them what's good, what's almost good, what's not very good. Everybody has a ton of stuff coming across their every single day. We have to make it easy for people to see where the problems are quickly, easily, and then apply changes and give them the data that will support that environment. This is sort of the construct. We're going to gather data, and we're going to store information that is accessible. We're going to store that in a format that is secure. We're going to build some visualized results. And those results, we're going to gain insights that are discovery. We're going to find out things that we didn't know before. We're going to go down different paths that we normally would not go down because of this data will lead additional questions. Some of those paths will be dead ends. But any path that you go down and looking at data, even though it's a dead end, you've gained more information. You've gained insights. You framed questions. You found out whether those questions were important or not. Some of them will be, some of them won't be, but that's fine. We learn in all the paths that we take to understanding our data. And that if it's a dead end, we've gained knowledge on the path to finding out that it was a dead end for us. This is an important concept, and I like to talk about this all the time, and it's really, and you'll hear this phrase used, it's called self-service analytics. It's an approach to data delivery and analytics that enable end users with little or no background in data analysis to access and use data for decision making and to gain insights. It doesn't do us any good if we provide data to individuals that they can't understand or they can't manipulate to ask their own questions. Or, I've long ago given up and looking at reports. Reports don't show me trends. Reports don't show me variances. I need to see data in some kind of context, to see data in relationship to what I expected, or relationship to what happened last year or last month, or data where it fits into a trend. That's the only way we can really support decision making through your data. So a single data point without context or without visualization has no meaning to me. A point that stands up within a contextual framework, a visual environment that lets me know quickly and easily what I need to know. Down into that data a bit more effectively is really where we need to go. And tools inside of business intelligence allows us to do that. We don't have to train people to be analysts. We don't have to train people how to read reports. We just need to provide information to individuals who use simple and easy to use filtering tools and give them the data that they need. So a brief example of what I'm talking about. So we now come metric in that initial how evaluation and with 10 days of initial contact to an agency. So let's look at what we have. We have a fairly simple footprint here. We have our data in our table on the upper left-hand corner. But this kind of visual environment, it first of all tells us what a metric is, and it gives that narrative. It tells us what the goal is. And we have in the upper left-hand corner a display of the raw data and where we are against our expectation. Little box that says program, that's a filtering tool called a slicer. That allows us to drill into our data and take a look at the performance from each of our clinics. We're taking a look at it, but we're at an 85%. Well, we need to understand how each of the clinics are doing, because we may have 4 of our 5 clinics doing outstanding and one of the clinics being the one that's lagging behind. So we need to take a look at that data on a more granular level. The right-hand slicer would allow us to take a look at data from a payer's perspective of some of the problems, maybe information from the payers, or we do better with certain payers than others. We know our average day is, and then we have a graph of our trend line. So probably what happened, this was a new initiative in June, July, and August. Everybody was on board. Everybody was excited. We redid our workflows. We had people looking at data, and then by September, things started falling off. And then in October, November, it sort of fell off. Somebody woke up, somebody took a look at the data, and somewhere around November, you can see where we're at 47%. Somebody looked at the data, or a group looked at the data and said, look, our performance is really lagging. In December, you already see that we're back up to 61%. In January, you'll see we're back up to almost 92%. You can see that in the graph. So this is a perfect example of putting data in place, monitor benchmarks, monitor results, understand where we are, and then make changes. Something happened in the November time frame that significantly turned around the performance on this parameter. But that would not have been possible if we didn't have the data in some kind of format. And it's like, this is just it's a page on it's a tab on an Excel spreadsheet. And a relatively small footprint to provide to people, but there's a lot of data here that can be utilized. So this is sort of the example that I'm talking about, is some simple self-service analytics. So as we go forward, we're going to be talking about some basic tools, and I'm going to begin showing you the really fundamental tools today. And the foundational tools in this level of business intelligence are the pivot table, pivot chart. And I'm, in a couple minutes, going to show you an example of that and show you how these tools can fundamentally change the way that we manage and look at our data. Pivot table, if people are not familiar with it, it's really an essential functionality in Excel that allows us to summarize and filter large amounts of data and put it into an easy-to-use and easy-to-understand format. So that an example is that, and I'll show you in a minute, we run a report from our electronic medical record. Data comes down in either an Excel format or a CSV, which is a common delimited text format, and suddenly I have in my fingertips 7,000 rows of data. 7,000 rows of data is pretty difficult to manage without some kind of tools. The pivot table is the first tool that we're going to use to begin aggregating and filtering our data. Once we create a pivot table, we're going to then create a pivot chart. Pivot's taking the data inside of our pivot table and arranging it so we're looking at it visually. And I'll show you that in just 1 minute. Those are the first two tools that we're going to take a look at today. In our next session, we're going to talk about get and transform. For you folks that have familiarity with the business intelligence tools or have been working with this for a while, it was originally called Power Query. They have recently changed that name. Be more descriptive of what the tool does. The tool provides fast and easy data gathering and shaping capabilities. It enables you to connect, combine, and refine data sources to meet your analytic needs. We're going to be spending a fair amount of time. This is the foundational tool inside of Excel that allows you to connect to your data sources, but also to transform them. All of our data is not useful in its raw form. Some of the data has holes in it. Some of the data has different kinds of formats that we can't use until they're changed. Or we can add columns that create mathematical relationships. So the get transform is the tool that really allows us to get our data, vet our data, transform it, and put it into a usable format. These that we're going to be spending a whole session on is Power Pivot. And feature in Excel enables you to import large amounts of data into Excel and create relationships, calculated fields, measures, and key performance indicators or KPIs to use for analysis. This is really where we create our data models. This is where we take information from different sources and load it up into our Excel and begin working with that data to create our analysis and visualization. The tool that is really the fundamental tool inside of Power Pivot is something that is called DAX, which is a data analytic expression formula that we use inside of our data models. That formula language is being amended on a monthly basis. It's robust. It allows a significant improvement in our ability to use the fundamental tools in Excel for data analytics, and we'll be looking at that much more closely. I do want to mention to folks that, there is absolutely no way after you see this series of presentations that I've provided that you're able to sit down and begin developing a business intelligence environment. These are really just designed to introduce you to the tools, hopefully begin thinking about what the possibilities are for you, show you some examples of really some of the more simple kinds of analysis that you can start doing and give a better idea of where you may want to go in your environment to build out your business intelligence strategy. We'll, at the end, show you a couple resources that I found to be helpful. I've taught myself these tools. I like that. I came from the standpoint of being an advanced Excel user, but you don't really need to start there. The first question I always ask, I'm asked to go in and do analysis of visual organizations and their capacity and ability to use these tools. The first thing I ask is, who in your environment knows how to do a pivot table? Laugh at me when I say that, but that to me is the first step in understanding the ability to aggregate and filter your data. I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute, but that's the question you go back and ask. Who knows how to do a pivot table? If you have good, strong foundational expertise in your organization around tables and pivot tables, you've made that first step. If that skill set is lacking, then between now and the next session, you should be thinking about who in the environment needs to get trained up on that pivotal set of skills. And you can get that started right away. So here's the way that I think about it. On the left, you have your external data sources. You need to get that data. We're going to use the get and transform to get and transform the data. We're then going to join data and create measures and KPIs inside of a data model, and we're going to use Power Pivot to do that. And then we'll create pivot tables, pivot charts, slicers, basic data elements around data analysis to allow us to work with our data. And we're just going to use the Excel tools to do that. So that's what we're going to do. So right now I'm going to do a quick demonstration. So give me for a second while I share my screen. All right. So what we have now, you should be looking at, is a Excel spreadsheet with some data elements in there. And look, this is actually, before we go on, this is a demonstration data set. There is no live data in this data set, although we use the services that are described, and we have the CPT codes, the client numbers are made-up client numbers. You'll see names later in this in our future demonstrations. Those staff names were randomly generated. There is no PHI data in this demonstration, so it's something that's easy for us to use. So we're going to look at this. This is actually the data set that we're going to use through our demonstration. This would be a perfect example of data that we might get by running a report from our billing system, electronic medical record system. And let's take a look at some of the quick data elements that we bring in here. We have staff. One of the things you do is you'll see that there are no names here. There's a staff identification. That would not be uncommon. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that, because part of data, part of self-service analytics is that you have to present data to people in a manner that they understand. So a large staff, and let's say you have 30 clinical staff, and each of them have a different ID number. Well, you can't train people to know what everybody's staff ID number is. So a simple example of how we'll use the business intelligence tools to transform that staff ID number into a staff name. That's part of self-service. You have to make it easy for people. You don't want them to go to a chart and say, okay, every time I'm looking at ST2, I'm looking at David Warsnick, because you don't want to put beers in front of people. That is the way that you get people not to utilize your data. Same kind of thing. We have a program code. We don't have a program name. All we get down, we have dates attached to it. That will be a critical part. And in this data set, we have a timestamp. So for an individual providing a service in this program on this date, and this is the timestamp. We have a service code. We have a description. We have the CPT code is available for us to utilize. We may have a client number. We have a client name. I mean, that's something that you need to think about in your environment, of whether you use client numbers, client names. That's compliance and HIPAA security. We don't have client names in our data set. Other data point that we have a revenue, what was billed, what was paid, what was not paid, who the payer was. We have some open fields, but this would be an example of a CSV file that we pull down and we export it and bring it into Excel. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to talk about tabling and pivot tables and show you some of the foundational tools. Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to take this data and we want to turn it into a table, because the table functionality in Excel allows us to do some basic filtering. And the first time I had to look at a new data set, I have to do some basic filtering, because I have to understand whether the data is complete, it's incomplete, and I have to vet my data. I spend a fair amount of time before we start building our visualizations to make sure that our data is complete and usable. I have 7,000 rows in this data set. It would not be unusual if I had a data element that was blank in a quarter of the records. I understand that. You need to know if you've got incomplete records in a data set. I'll show you an example of the kind of data vetting that I might do. First thing, and this is the easiest thing we'll do in the next 4 sessions, is to create a table for this data. I went into Insert, I did Table. Excel is going to look for contiguous columns and contiguous rows, and it's going to suggest to you what the table content should look like, and to be between you, me, and a wall, as long as there's no blank rows. I have always found this to be very accurate. Create a table. So what you'll see is that two primary changes that occurred. The first primary change is that I have these filters for each of my data sets, a little drop down, and that I've structured my rows with a change in the formatting so I can differentiate different records. So look a little bit about in filtering. So the first thing that is drawn to my eyes here is that I have these blanks in the end time. So the first question I have is be usable. I really want to be able to use the timestamps on these transactions, but I've got these holes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these filters here, and I'm going to deselect all, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick my blanks. Now, I filtered the data, and I'm looking only at the records that have a blank end time. So I want to do then is say, okay, is this a problem for me? So I'm going to go do a drop down on service description, And you'll see that my blank end time is for canceled, contact notes, no-show, note not billed, paperwork, reschedule appointment. That tells me that I have a blank in my end time for those records that are not billable services. So that's fine, because what I need the end time for is to create a duration on each of my services. So that's a real quick example of how you can use these filtering tools to begin vetting your data, looking for holes and making sure the data is useful for you. Here in this record on row 36 is that this date doesn't look very much like a date. We'll be using the Get and Transform tools to make sure that all of these records are in the same format. So let's go up here and let's clear our record. Now, you could use the table to start doing some of your analytics. Okay, real quickly, what I want to do is I want to look at staff 1, and I want to look at just their no-shows, and I want to look at their no-shows for January. And you could go into your table, you could go into design, and you could do a total row, and you could add a count to this. You could say, okay, I know that staff ST1 had, whoever that is, January had 10 no-shows. And then you could choose your filter, and you could go look at that for ST2, and you could understand that's much higher. That was 65. And you could put yourself a little spreadsheet on the side, and you could put your staff on one column and your months across, and you could go through this filtering process, and you could create that data that's time-consuming, and it is certainly inefficient. So instead of doing that, why don't we go inside of our table, go to an insert, and we'll insert a pivot table. I want to take my pivot table, and I want to put it right here. So let's say yes. Okay. So I'll do the same thing, but let's put it inside of our pivot table. And this is not to teach you how to do pivot tables. This is to give you an understanding of some of the functionality available to us and some of the foundational work we're going to need to be able to use data analytic tools inside of Excel. So what I do is I'm going to take my dates, and I'm going to put them in my rows here, and I'm just interested in months. So my pivot table is now going to start aggregating data, and it's going to start looking at information on a monthly basis. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my staff onto a filter, and I'm going to count client IDs. So what I've done is that I've now know that these are the number of client contacts that we had on a monthly basis, but it has all of our data set in there. So I'll change this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my pivot table, and I'm going to go into Insert, and I'm going to insert a slicer, because what I'm interested in is service description. So this is going to give me all my service descriptions, and what I was interested in was no-shows. So I've been able to take my data and filter it down. So on a monthly basis, I'm taking a look at all the no-shows. I don't like having my filter up into here for staff, so let's go back into our pivot table, and let's go back into Insert, and let's insert another pivot chart, insert another slicer. And the slicer that I'm going to do is staff. So now what you're seeing, I'm able to say, okay, for staff 1, I want to know what the count of no-shows were for each month. Now, we did that in the example that I showed you in the table, but I had to go through and look at each one individually, count each one individually, and that's a very time-consuming process. This allows us to aggregate our data and to select different staff if we wanted to look at different programs. We could say, I'm not interested in no-shows, I'm interested in canceled appointments. I'm interested in canceled appointments and no-shows, and I'm interested for different staff. So you begin having an environment that you can begin drilling down into different aspects that you need to look at. So let's put the final piece in here. Let's go back to our pivot table, and let's go into insert, and I'm going to insert a pivot chart. And it's going to give all kinds of different ideas about what this pivot chart might look like, how I want to do it. So let's just create a simple line chart. I'm going to select that. It's going to put it over into here. Now, what will happen is that this chart will change on my filtering. It will change based upon either of the filtering. So suddenly you have an environment where you have a visual display and you're able to pick different aspects and different variables and see what's happening. So we would probably do something really simple here is I take off all those buttons. I would go in and say I want to add a trend line for you and folks who remember your college statistics. That's a linear trend analysis that gives us trend lines. I may want to format the legend and move it down to the bottom right here, and then we'll close this out, and then I want to go up here and make it a little bit prettier, and we say, let's do this, let's go into design, let's want to look at it this way. So we did in a very short period of time. We took a data set which has 7,400 rows in it. We created a simple table. From the table, we created a simple pivot chart, a pivot table that allows us to aggregate by month across our different steps. We've put in a filter that allows us to filter on service description, and we allow us to filter on staff. Took those 7,000 rows in the course of about 5 minutes, and I was moving slowly. I was able to create a much more dynamic environment that allows us to take a look at service parameters by staff, by month, and trend that out. And then the sky's sort of the limit. You can start saying, okay, let's take a look at rescheduled appointments, or, where's the psychotherapy visiting? You could break this down by day of the week. You can really, once you have the data available to you, you can really start moving very quickly into an analytic environment. And we start with the two fundamental tools that are necessary for us, which are tables and pivot tables and pivot charts. Hopefully, a lot of you out there are looking at this and say, yeah, I know that. Let's move on to the good stuff. And that will be great. But if some of you out there are looking at this and it's really foreign to you, or you don't think you have the skill sets inside of your environment to do that, then this is a starting point for you. Tables and pivot tables. We will be using this functionality to begin creating our simple BI and analytic tools. With that being said, you should be back to the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available. One of the resources that I went to, and this says I have no relationship with these folks, they don't know who I am, but there is a website called Power Pivot Pro. Some online training, they have some books, they have blogs, they have training classes. In my educating myself in terms of the tools, there's been a go-to resource for me. They have an online training course around not Power Query. They also have it around Power Pivot. It's a course that you take at your own pace. It's not expensive. I think the Power Pivot course is about $300 or so. But I found it to be the best resource that I came across for teaching myself some of the fundamental tools here. Introduction, Microsoft has a pretty robust training environment also. This is the link to the introduction to Get and Transform. This is the old Power Query. The second link is the Power Pivot and gives you a basic overview of those resources. Before we do the next presentation, I'd recommend not necessarily that you go to Power Pivot Pro, but at least go to some of the Microsoft tools to give you a foundational understanding of Power Query or Get Transform and Power Pivot. That's what we'll begin working on over the next couple sessions. We do only have a couple minutes left, then I'd be available to answer any questions. So if anybody has any questions in the next couple minutes before we proceed, then I'd be happy to answer them. If not, then we'll for today, and we'll be looking for our next session, which will be in 2 weeks. So while we'll see if any questions are coming in, we'll go back to the schedule. All right. I don't see any questions come through. So it's 12:59. So wrap up for today. Thank you very much for your attendance. Like I said, I think it's really important for us to start with the contextual framework, understand we're all with the same definition, give an example of some of the quick dirty tools that we'll be building off of. And on Tuesday, October 30th, we'll be picking up the second part of our series, Get Transformed. This is when the good stuff starts. And so please, I hope that you join on that day. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and I look forward to talking with you on the 30th. Thank you. Take care, and I hope you have a great day. Bye now.